Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Second Bite podcast. I am very excited about the episode that we have today. My guest, Kevin Wilhelm from Pod Marketing, is with me today. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Todd. I've been a huge listener for years, and it's one of the favorite things I do in the morning is listen to your show. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. So we're happy to have you. I'm going to jump in. It's going to be a great episode, and I'll tell the audience the reason why. Most of the time we talk about guys that have done a transaction or are going to do a transaction. We have a very specific topic for you that I think is going to be super helpful, because in the past, you have bought out a couple of partners. And that's a tricky and a complicated and a nuanced thing to do. And I want to break that down a little bit. Before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor, the folks at Fiscal Advocate. I don't know that you know them. John Morris's shop there. John built an agency and sold it. And Fiscal Advocate now helps agency owners, A, get their financials right, B, put them on a dashboard so they can manage their business from financially data-driven data points that just give a tremendous view of the business and an understanding of the business. So they're our sponsor. So the good folks at Fiscal Advocate, thank you for that. And their contact info is in the show notes. So Kevin, I want to unpack, as I talked about, the specifics around how you've been able to buy out your partner, because you've done that twice. Before we do that, tell me about Pod Marketing, what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah, you bet. So we are a digital agency, 10 years, just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We were call it cold start. And we knew when we started, we wanted to do something a little different. And so we focused on industry. And originally, we focused on the home services industry and have since grown to support more than just that. And so Pod Marketing is the umbrella company. And within that, we have different brand names for the industries we serve. So we have a dental marketing agency. We have a optical agency. We have one in senior living. And currently, we have sort of a startup in the medical aesthetics. So we did start in the home services. We have since sold that. I actually sold that division to my sister, who has worked for me or had worked for me for many years. So right now we are supporting those four industries, everything from the small mom and pop, small business owner to the enterprise level, which, a publicly traded company with, 40, 50, 70 different communities in senior living. And so we sort of support the gambit, if you will.
And the business has been very successful. You've been growing very nicely over the 10 years. And that, in some respects, for this topic, creates part of the problem. So you have built a successful business. And I find a lot of times, for example, you called it a cold start, or you founded it and you found it with partners. And when you found it with partners, and if it's me and you, we say, okay, well, we own 50-50. There's no consideration per se of who's going to outperform the other, who's going to add more value. And sometimes those relationships just become unequitable over a longer period of time. Now, you still have a partner, but more recently you bought out one. And I'm wondering, how did you make that work, number one? And are there any lessons learned that you could share that are not purely economical, but maybe more psychological, that made it successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell the story. And I think part of this is understanding there's some unique factors in this that won't apply to everybody, but I think there are some lessons along the way that might help. So originally, the company was founded with, two different parties. So there was an operating side and there was an investor side. And so my current partner today, Kareem, him and I are still operating partners in the business. And when we started this, it was with we'll call them investor partners at the time, though I think they played a large role when it came to consulting, when it came to, they were our first client, they were our landlord. So they played a big part in our beginnings for sure. And when we founded the company, I remember sitting on the couch and it came down to 50-50, but it was actually our partner that said, well, somebody needs the hammer. And I remember that being a pretty awkward and kind of a weird moment because I think we wanted that. But we were also in a place where they were, I guess, kind of the call it investors. And we'll talk about what that looked like because essentially their investment was just covering our salary for a year. And that was the investment. So it was, putting enough of money into an account that we could draw on for a year. And if it didn't work out, I have to go get a job. And if it did, great. And
so you and Kareem,
yep.
And then this third partner, and the third partner said, I'll fund your salary so you guys can give this, your full effort for a year. When the three of you were in that room, did somebody say, okay, well, we're 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Is that how you were going to do it?
No, it ended up, our partner actually said, I'll be 50% and you guys will be 50%. And he's like, but someone needs the hammer. And so eventually, I actually don't remember how it happened, but maybe he offered it and said, you guys are operating it. We'll give you 51. And so I think that was a pretty good first step in the relationship when you talk about trust and kind of what is to come later on.
Also, to be fair, there was nothing there, right? They put money. Right. And this is always a friction point once the business is successful, because you can look back and say, geez, man, you've been very well rewarded for what you have. And the investor, rightly so, says, dude, I put money in when there was nothing here. Right? I deserve an outsized reward for that.
100%. He took all the risk. I mean, I had quit my job. I had a very sturdy job. I was working for a publicly traded company. I had shares in that company. I walked away from a pretty prominent career path, but as any entrepreneur has, you have this belief in yourself that there's reasons to drive you into starting a company, and there's belief, you want to do it your way, both from an employee standpoint, but customer standpoint. So that all made sense. And so, but I was walking away from that, but he was writing a check, and I think there's a big difference when you write a check because that's real money.
The difference that anybody on listening that has written a check will be shaking their head absolutely right now. But at some point, and I guess the time frame doesn't necessarily matter, but at some point, you guys realize, wow, we've got a successful business. This thing's going to work. We're never going to have to go work for somebody else. And then at another point, you and Kareem must have looked at each other and said, well, shit, are we going to pay this guy forever because of that investment? How did that evolve?
Over time, I think that we've always been very appreciative of the guidance because more than just the money, he was a client. Without a doubt, we would not be where we are without him. And it's more than the money. It was the challenging us to think differently. He had run and sold successful businesses. And so he really provided mentorship from day one. We worked in his office. And so we were constantly just in lunches and talks about how to treat employees and how to think about growth and how to think about investment in your business. And so he really shaped the early parts of our business and why it became successful. And in the first, we'll call it 5 years, even though we were growing, there was no money left over. Like we were, probably, we didn't have to put money back in, but we weren't pulling any money out for a long time. And as somebody that writes a check initially, who's not taking a salary, there's something that comes with that because they're giving time, you're giving guidance, you're giving mentorship. You did write a check, and there's no return on that.
Except so, you guys continue to take a salary.
100%. We were living that was our lifestyle was coming out of that. We hadn't taken any extra, but we were at least we were taking some money out of the business, for operating. And so we recognized early there was more than just the money that he provided in that beginning. And so we were very grateful for that. As the business continued to grow, then you get into a point where, okay, it's quite successful. And I will tell you, we didn't entertain the idea right away.
With making distributions?
Yeah. So we were very happy to make them. I think part of this was we wanted everybody to win. And that was always from the beginning. And we have and always will have a deep appreciation for the role that he played. And so when the first distribution started coming, we were happy, of course, happy to do them. Everybody was winning. Then there was sort of I think when the moment, not changed, but the tide changed was probably, he was big into that first industry that we talked about, the home services industry, and played a big strategic part of that. And we made the decision kind of collectively that we were probably not the right agency for that industry anymore. And what it needed a different approach. And so we ended up selling that division, as I said earlier, to a family member, my sister. Interesting enough, he actually became a partner in that because his passion is very much in supporting his industry. And so now he's sitting in two agencies, far more active in the home services one because that's his passion. It's what his he knows it intimately. And so his contributions from like a day-to-day standpoint, those became less and less. And I think
as what year is this, Kevin? You're in your 10th year, so this is year 7?
7, yeah, 3 years ago is when this happened.
Okay,
yeah, and so it all kind of happened around the same time. The business became more successful that time, and he was putting a lot of time and energy into the second business, which makes a ton of sense, and getting a lot of fulfillment from that. And so then we got to a point where I think we're looking at 10 years in business and saying, what does the next 10 years look like?
Just to pause for a sec. So years 7, 8, and 9, or 8, 9, and 10, you made annual distributions to all three of the partners.
That's right.
And was that enough to pay him back what he had put in that first year?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
or more
back and more. Yeah. So I think just even on the distributions alone, I think the investment would be a solid one. Where the conversation really took off internally, I think was, so Kareem and I we didn't have even percentages. And so I had more. I was actually the 51% owner, and our investor partner had about 34, leaving my other operating partner about 16. And that's where that's Kareem. And that's where we looked at probably you talk about just inequitable sort of like based on contributions. And even though there's a salary, the distributions far outweighed the combination of salary and distributions at that level. And I think that's when we looked at it and said, what do we want the next 10 years to be? Are we, is this the best business decision for us? And we had to, I guess, really look in the mirror and go, this is going to be a hard conversation. We really enjoy him, like him, appreciate him. But at this point, what's the best business decision? And we had to, I guess, look inside and go, okay, now's the time. The business can afford to buy out him. We are in a place where we're not talking as much as we used to. So just from like a strategic standpoint, it's maybe less reliant. And so that's really when we looked at it and said, now I think is probably the right time to broach the subject, even though we knew it wouldn't be easy. So this would have been about, I guess, a year ago. So like 9.5 years in the business. He's gotten all of his money out. He's gotten distributions for the last 3 years.
And if it were me, I would be thinking, well, this worked out great. I know I had to be patient, but I'm set for a great gravy train year after year getting distributions here. Yeah. So what was that conversation like? How did you prepare for that? And how much of it was your approach and how much of it was your investor's personality and worldview?
Well, here's where the first sort of just advice that when I look back and really reflect, it's how we as partners, the three of us, treated each other from day one. And I think that is the foundation that started the conversation.
Because there was a lot of communication along the way.
Lots. And I would say that he had to really trust us. So just as an investor, we're operating the business. We have a lot of just carte blanche on decisions we make. Number one is we've proven that it was a good investment. So we'd made the right decisions to grow the business to where it was. But we we shared the hard times. Like we shared the things that weren't working. We were open about that. We shared the challenges. We treated one another with a lot of respect. So we never really over 10 years experienced conflict. There was moments of conflict where people would hear us almost yelling in boardrooms because we had disagreements on strategy or disagreements on approach or what have you. But that was something we really actually appreciated about him, is that he was always somebody to challenge us. That if we thought we were doing well, he was very quick to go, it's not that good. It's not that good. You can do better. And so, but there was never real conflict in the partnership. So I think that's part of this, is just how you treat your partners early on. And we were always open to sharing everything. And there was no hiding. There was no skirting issues. We were very upfront about those. And that built the trust and built the communication for this conversation to be had. It was actually Kareem who led that conversation. And so he had prepared for it. I think he took a lot of time, a lot of preparation. I think this definitely fell outside of his comfort zone, and he essentially just said to him, we'd like to bring up the idea of potentially buying you out as a partner. We look at the next 10 years and probably you're just looking at different things. And I think it came down to motivation. And he was speaking because he had kind of the most to gain on this one. He was saying he wanted to be motivated. He wanted to be fairly compensated for what he was putting in and the impact that he was having in the business. And so that was how we talked about it. Part of the strategy was also...
So I'm sorry, when you guys brought it up first, he was open to the conversation?
So yes, he said to us, if I'm you guys, I'm making the same phone call. So this makes sense.
So he's a pretty self-aware guy.
Yeah, very much. But what he said next was, which was, this is the fun part. He goes, if I'm you guys, I'm making this phone call, but I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to sell. I don't want to sell. Like I appreciate where you're coming from. I recognize, and if I'm you, I'm doing the same thing. But I'm not really interested. And at this point, we hadn't made an offer. We had one ready, but we hadn't made it. And so we decided just to go, okay, we wanted to hear both sides. And so we said, well, what if we come back in a week and present you with the offer, and let's go from there and see. And so it was like a seed, planting a seed, I think, in all of our brains. We want to see how he would react to it.
Would you suggest that if you had to do it again, would you suggest get the idea out there and then come back with specifics, or rather than appear to bull rush him with an offer right away?
Yeah, I think when we talk about buying and selling a business, it is probably the most emotional thing any entrepreneur is going to go through on both sides, because this is our baby, but also something that he's very proud of, something that he's been a part of. And also, it comes with big money. There's big outcomes on this. So I think that understanding the emotional impact it's going to have on all parties was really important for us. And I think that in order to diffuse the emotions and speak logically, you have to give time between certain points of conversation. And so the plan was, if he was like, hey, I've been waiting for this phone call, let's talk numbers. We wanted to be ready. We wanted to be prepared to have that, but we were truly not prepared to share that offer yet. We knew we were going to plant the seed. We're going to come back in about a week. So we did that. We waited a week. On the second phone call, we just said, we understand you don't want to. That makes sense. Why would you? The business has grown. We're 25 to 35% growth a year. It's finally profitable. It's in a place where the future is very bright. And, part of that was also not lying to him. Like we're not going to tell him the business is doom and gloom, therefore you should sell and we want to buy. It's saying we actually think the future is very bright. And that's why we are wanting to make this move, and we want to bet on ourselves again on this one. And so with the offer, the strategy there was, let's come up with what we believe to be a fair valuation. And so we looked at what was on the market, like how other businesses were being valued, how agencies were being valued specifically. And we pulled sort of sell sheets. And so we had precedent as to what other companies were going to market with.
And you showed him all those things?
Yeah. So that's how we started the conversation is I pulled up everyone that I had looked at in that calendar year, but up to even 12 months. So I think we showed 10 different sell sheets. So we knew this wasn't closing price, but this is what they were going to market with based on multiples of EBITDA and percentage of revenue and all of that. And so sort of had a ballpark of like what our business would be worth without going through a formal valuation. Mm-hmm. And then we rounded up. And we said, okay, here's what we believe it to be worth. And we're now going to get it to the next $1 million. Like it was close. I think it was, it was like, it ended with an 8. We rounded up to make sure that it was bigger.
It was like 1.8 or 2.8 or something like that. And you said, let's make it 3 or what have you.
That's right. Yeah.
So you weren't cheaping out on it, right?
It wasn't cheaping out. And then we also, because we've had, 10 years of experience, we knew working capitals. Initially, we have a healthy amount of cash in the bank. So we're okay, he's going to want that. So let's make sure that's included. We don't want that to be a surprise down the road.
And I'm sorry, because I think this is really important. You're not hiding, you're not projecting doom and gloom. Number one, because I think good, smart people at any level see right through that. But you're also saying we're not hiding anything. Here's the cash in the bank. Here's our current balance sheet. It was full and open, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of this is if you treat somebody with respect, they'll treat you back with it. And had we tried to go in with some sort of devious strategy of underhanded, as soon as it smells like that, the conversation's over, and now we're in conflict. And I'm in YPO, I'm in EO. Every issue that comes up that derails businesses seems to be business partner related. And issues with business partners just derails it. It's the same thing personally with people that go through divorce. It just derails you. And so we knew that was the risk here, is that we could potentially enter in conflict with a partner. And so we didn't want that. That was our ultimate outcome, was no conflict. And we wanted to be able to do this fairly, showing respect to the contributions he had made along the way. And so the offer, we believe, was fair plus a little bit, because we also knew that the future's bright. We're growing every day. If we don't give them some of that,
it should be a premium.
Yeah, it should be a premium. We looked at cash.
And to put it in perspective, though, it's in the 7 figures that you're talking about for this buyout.
It's millions. Yeah, millions of dollars. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And so, and then the other part is
cash on the balance sheet, but you got to go get the millions from somewhere, correct?
Yes. And so part of this is we also had to get approval from a bank to make sure that we could write the check. So we had to have that first. So we had the approval. We knew we could write the check. But the kicker in the offer to him was we also let him decide how he wanted to receive the payment. So is it all up front? Is it over? And so just from helping with tax planning and all of that, we offered for him to finance the whole thing, which sounds like obviously that would be beneficial, but not everybody wants. We had both options. We could write the full check.
You could do 100% cash or 100% finance.
That's right, at an interest rate that was less than what the bank was charging us, but good for it. He was happy
he could get. Yeah.
So we offered that, and his answer or his response to us was, I'll probably remember it forever. He just said, "This is fair, and I will not negotiate any of these terms. It'll either be I take this or I won't." And he's like, it's you guys presented the right offer, so I appreciate that. It now just comes down to, am I wanting to do this? Am I willing to do this is the question, not wanting, because he'd made it clear he did not want to, but am I willing to do it?
Right.
And so I knew that we had, I was happy about that. I was happy that we had come to the table with the right offer. And then,
and obviously, I think if you would have cheaped out, if you would have left out the working capital, if you wouldn't have given him the options, it would have been a very easy decision for him to say, economics aren't right, but the respect level is not right. And I don't trust these guys because I think they're pulling something on me. So I'll just keep my position, which seems to be the default. It's what I see oftentimes. You guys run the business. I'm just an investor. You will always know more than me. So the fact that you were very honest about that, I think must have had obviously an impact with him.
Yeah. He either walks away from it, or he counter negotiates with something much higher. And in our USA, whether we have the mechanisms or not to be able to force him out, we didn't want to go down that route. We didn't want to use a shotgun clause. We didn't want to soil the relationship. It's a partnership, that we'll be partners for life, and we wanted to maintain that and probably do business together again. And so that's part of our outcome of what we wanted here. So we presented the offer to him. We told him to take as much time as he needed because this was a huge thing. And so part of just understanding this, he has another operating business, very successful. And so he is not reliant on, this was not his, break it or make it moment. He has been a successful business owner, successful entrepreneur, successful exits. This was a investment for him. But I think there was a little bit more emotional tie because we all enjoyed working together. And I think the biggest thing for him was not so much the money, but just not being part of the team anymore, not being part of the group. And so we wanted to give him a space, and we just said, hey, take as long as you need to process this. That took about a month of
Wow.
his kind of soul searching, a little longer than I thought. And
we attempted to call him and ask him what's up.
It was one of those, like, when you're in a sales, you have a big sales pitch, you don't want to push too much, so I kind of thought the same way. So there's a couple check-ins. He ended up calling me one day, and he just said, why should I do this? Because I have to take the money out and put it somewhere else, and there's no better investment than with you and Kareem right now. So it's foolish of me to do this. I don't need the cash right now to do anything. It's an investment that's growing every day. So to pull it out is actually not my best move. Tell me why I should do this. And I think in that moment, again, you're conflicted with, well, you can tell him the risks of the business and try to go from fear. And I was like, he's too smart for that. And B, just always sit with honesty. And so I just said, why should you do it? Because we're asking you to. And that was it. We just said, look, you don't have to. We're not going to force you to do it. This is purely a request for us to continue to stay motivated, for us to feel like, to make sure that we continue to feel, and I guess in a sense of fairness over the next 10 years. We feel today it is 100% fair where we're at. We want to continue to feel that way. And so we're just asking you, would you do it? And I think just speaking to that part of him, he ultimately, is and acted in a way that showed who he was for the last 10 years. And he said, yeah, let's do it. I'm willing to do it.
I mean, that underscores the importance of just having a good man as your partner from the beginning. Number one, I'm sure it made the entire 10 years better. I wonder, was there ever a moment where you considered letting him keep from 30 something down to 5% or 3% or something to always have a chip in the game?
Yeah, I think he might have even asked that at some point. And I think just at that point to justify the payments we're going to be making, the risk and all of that, the percentage had to come from somewhere. And so part of this too is an actual second side negotiation with Kareem about trying to get us to a place where we wanted to be from an equity standpoint. And so ultimately we just felt it was just time to move on. It was an option, but we felt it was probably just everybody's best bet to move forward and maintain the friendship and potentially look for other things to do together as partners.
So, that's a great story. And I'm so happy that you shared it. It's something I know that causes conflict a lot, just because of divergent needs of investors or even partners or even operational partners. And as I said, it sure seems like you were working with a high quality individual, and that certainly helps a lot. If there were 2 or 3 suggestions as we wrap up that you would tell somebody, absolutely make sure you do these 2 things or 3 things to have a successful outcome, what would those be, Kevin?
So number 1 is act from the beginning Don't wait into the end to be fair.
Meaning at the beginning of your relationship.
You act that way all the time. Build the trust. If there are issues in the foundation of your relationship, they will show themselves at the most emotional time. So fix them along the way. Don't let the small cracks become, unfixable. That's the first thing. And so that's what I would say. I say that in marriage as well. Fix them early. Number 2 is really lean into empathy. And what I mean by that is take the time to go through, what will this person go through when I give them the news? So where are they at in life? Where has our partnership been to date? What are the conversations we've had? How are they going to take the news? How are they going to perceive this? Really put yourself in their situation and spend hours there thinking about it. And
do you share that with them? Did you say to him, hey, I know you're probably in this circumstance, or I know it might seem this? Do you share that empathy with them?
Yeah. So the way I think the way I shared it was, I know you don't want to do this. I know that I'm asking you something you don't want to do. Okay. That was the empathy I went in. But I also know, his financial circumstance. He's not needing this, but I didn't bring that into it. It was just more, I know I'm asking you something you don't want to do. And I think that helped, just being able to say, I'm empathizing with this situation.
Right.
And then the third piece of advice is don't cheap out. Don't try to win the negotiation. If you're wanting this outcome, be willing to buy the outcome. And for us, never did we look at it and say, how do we get this for the lowest possible deal? We're looking and saying 10 years from now, what is this percentage, this equity going to be worth? And what are we willing to pay today to have that in 10 years from now? And that's why we were willing to pay a little bit more, why we were willing to round up, why we were willing to give into a lot. Like there was things that he wanted and in the negotiations. And part of it was we understood that we were actually coming from a place that he had the leverage. But part of that was just we were asking him something he didn't want to do. And we were therefore willing to give a little extra to get the deal done because we were buying tomorrow's outcome, not today's outcome.
That's great insight and advice, particularly because I think a lot of people, if they talk about negotiation, want you to think 3 steps ahead, which means you got to start lower so that you can move up. And if you would have started lower, I think your answer would have been no, and you would still have a third of the equity that you really need for you and Kareem and for future employees in the hands of somebody that's not part of the business.
That's right.
Geez, yeah. Kevin, I got to tell you, this is something we try to help clients with as often as possible. I think those 3 pieces of insight are terrific. Particularly the repair the relationships along the way. I think it just makes for a better life in general, but it also drove a better outcome here. So it will be great to see now what you and Kareem do with the business and how you continue to grow it. I really appreciate you sharing your insights on this topic, and I wish you guys great success as you continue to grow the business.
Thank you very much, Todd. It's a pleasure to be a guest. I'm very, very honored. And if any of your listeners are interested in just more details or anything, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share.
That's super generous, Kevin. Your contact information will be in the show notes. Thanks again to the folks at Fiscal Advocate. And this was just a great episode. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.